Ooh. Welcome back, Curt. Good
morning, handsome.
Try again. It's all
You
good.
know, it's Sunday morning.
Fresh coffee.
We've got our coffee. We've got our matchy cups.
That's right.
But we didn't dress the same before school.
As usual.
So how come on Sunday morning you're all suit and tied?
Well, this is it. I was thinking about wearing field apparel, but I was like, well, I have to keep Curt off his balance.
I see.
It's all.
Right.
There's nothing more. Nothing more interesting than that.
So just want to do your thing of reminding people that they can comment, etc.
Yeah, please do. And I appreciated the comments that we got from the work we did yesterday, even already. I was like that, and there was a lot more of them. That was nice. I don't know what to say about them. It's like this is just.
Well, just encourage people to comment. Especially if there's something they want to clarify.
That's right.
I mean, it's sort of the content is sort of a filtering mechanism. Right? I mean, it's like, there's a certain kind of person who wants to sit through a law class. There's a certain kind of person who doesn't. So, it's probably self-filtering. And so we get really insightful comments. And I'm surprised at the quality of the Telegram channel since we started doing this. You can see how quickly it's changing.
So don't be shy. That's what that means.
Yeah, don't be shy.
Jump in there and try to learn it. And if you have a question, it will become clear, and it may help other people in addition to that.
If there's the usual Google filters out a lot of good things that should filter out. I mean, excuse me, YouTube filters out a lot of it puts comments to the side that shouldn't be there. But then you get a couple now that are just, the fundamentalists and Nazi defense leagues are out in
Nazi defense leagues, poor guys. They've been taking a beating for decades. Don't know when to throw in the towel. That's good.
Yeah, well,
that's all right.
I have got to somehow, I'm going to have to go to therapy to get over my horror at the decline in ability as ability decreases.
I have a story on this subject because my dad was a history professor for 27 years. And he made note of this fact, because he started in 1970. And he said what happened was he made a lot more money being a college professor than he ever anticipated. And it was because what happened was they opened the floodgates, and they just stopped managing the gates and made it so everyone can get a college degree, and just jamming people in there that had no right, reason to be there, really.
Yes.
And then so they bought the professors off by paying them a lot of money to deal with these guys who were doing remedial high school work, essentially. Yes. And it's all appalling.
Yeah, I got a relative cousin who's a very nice man. He's a successful businessman, and he's a dumb fuck. But he's a dumb fuck that's a good
It's got person. A good heart.
It's a good person. He's disciplined, right? And so there are colleges you can send dumb fucks to. It's basically high school. And so with some struggle, they can get out of remedial high school, right? But then these are people with 100 IQs, right? These are 105 IQs, whatever. Then there's people with that are between there and 115. They shouldn't be going to college either. Then there's people from 115 to 120, and they should be in it's really at the point where what they're doing is they're learning administrative roles. And then there's 120 or 125 and above, and that's doctors and engineers and whatever, scientists and whatever. And it makes sense to educate those people. It makes sense to make sure that those people don't pay for education. But it makes sense if you think it makes a lot of sense to make everybody else pay for education to keep them from wasting education resources. I mean, my experience was that, it was like the nerds. We were like the people who needed to be there. And everybody else was there just for sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that's all that was going on.
So there was a story I would relate, which is there was a class that I will, it's virtue signal that I never paid for the class because I audited it, because I'm not going to pay for this class. But it was the ethics of nuclear war. And it related to our conversation. Yes, that's what I said. I said, there's no ethical, and this is before I understood how nuclear weapons actually perform their dirty work. And I was a student of nuclear. I still have a book on my shelf about this. And it's like this, the ethics of nuclear war. And it's like trying to tie St. Thomas Aquinas to that, man, that was rude. The professor, I think I earned his enmity forever for that one. Because I was more rude enough.
Yes.
But yes, it was awful. So there we have
it. I had to quit one class because I was afraid the teacher was going to throw me out.
It was preemptive running away.
Well, it's the history of the British Empire, and I'm like, by the time I'm in college, of course,
right.
I'm like, I'm going to this course thinking I'm going to learn something.
That was a mistake.
I should have been teaching the fucking thing, because the guy was like, he was basically a communist, right? And I'm like, do you understand the theory of incentives? Do you understand anything to do with economics? Do you understand? Oh God, it was horrible, and I really thought I was going to get kicked out. So I resigned. I got out of two classes like that. One was macroecon.
Yeah.
Because I kept insulting the professor, and I'm like, I can't help myself, right? When you're that wrong,
stop.
When you're that wrong,
I'm obligated.
And then the professor kept saying stuff, and I would correct him.
Oh.
And they don't like that very much.
It's challenging their authority.
And of course, I'm this young nerd, right? What the fuck do I know? I'm just looking for truth, right? I don't have any idea.
That in and of itself is the problem.
Yes.
The only truth you're obligated to seek is, what does the professor truly want me to say?
Yes.
It's like, okay.
And then I had the opposite reaction in contract law, the logic of contract law, where the professor, he'd been teaching gifted students his whole life. So, I go in there and the guy treats me like, I'm a special apple that fell from the tree, right? But, I was just so socially clueless at that, at 18. I wasn't socially cued in enough to understand what was going on around me. I mean, I just view things as typical autist, as just facts, right? Or facts are true or false, facts or non-facts, right? It's amazing that I had girlfriends,
Just goes to tell you the taste of women, right? It's like that, like.
I had a smoking hot, awesome girlfriend all through college.
Good man. Man.
Anyway.
It's all good. Like I say, we just remain calm and move forward.
Yeah.
Pull the oar against the tide.
Anyway, it's just proof that if you're reasonably good looking and know how to dress yourself, and you have learned some manners, you know,
I-
you get away with a lot.
No, I got a new report because I'm report from the manosphere, which is this. It's like this. The this was kind of stunning to me, and it was appalling and obviously true. So I'm like, I'll share it with you, which is this: the women prefer the hookup culture.
Yeah, they do.
Oh my, what a
Yeah,
mess.
this is like I said, everything that we thought, right, was way worse than we thought. It's not that men want to be promiscuous, it's that women do. Right?
Wait. It's like the women give themselves permission to do everything they think the young men do and can't because of
Yes.
lack of opportunity.
Yes.
But the women have no limits on opportunity. It's like, whoa, that's a bad.
So we forget that the evolution of property allowed for the domestication of women.
Oh my.
Did you like that? That's not me. That's Engels. I mean, that's how old that is. That's Engels, Marx and Engels. The evolution of property made it so that you didn't have to use violence to control the hyperconsumption of women. So like I said, marriage isn't a marriage isn't a Pareto optimum, it's a Nash equilibrium, and mating produces the Pareto optimum. In other words, selection within relatively monogamous cultures does that, but you get the condition where none of us are really happy, but most of us are happier than we would be otherwise, right?
Right. It's a general turmoil otherwise.
Yes. So yeah, but what I said is that is like, this is what I mean by I don't like this knowledge. I like the illusion that women are good things.
So that in your truth seeking you discovered truth that made you cringe.
I fucking hate it.
Sorry.
I
don't like it either. And it's like,
what it means is that women are extremely dangerous to every society, every organization, unless their hyperconsumption is constrained. Because the problem in developing any society is not so much production, although it matters, but it's the prohibition on hyperconsumption. Because it's only by the prohibition on hyperconsumption that surpluses can be devoted to the production of commons, therefore reducing the individual income need for everyone. So it's just like what that means is women are intrinsically evil, and I just don't like that.
Quigley talks about the civilization is based upon the production of surplus, and hyperconsumptive societies can't.
No.
So no civilization is possible in that circumstance.
Correct. And so that's why, of course, it's not been possible for women to play hyperconsumptive games like this before. So what's happened again is we've let the Pandora out of the box, and the hyperconsumption that they're resulting is depopulation. Right, so we're having population collapse, which they will celebrate as well. There's too many people now, except that, well, there's too many third world people. There's not enough first world people. And then they don't want to admit that, because that means they have a responsibility to produce generations, right? And a generation requires more than 2 children. That means the average woman, we have to hope, will produce at least 3 children, right? So that means that that's quite a bit of work there to produce 3 kids, even if you crank one out every year and a half or 2 years, and even if it takes
It takes a generation to do that.
Yeah, so you've got quite a bit of work there. Of course, the smart answer is that given our wealth, you should crank them out from 18 to 22. And when you're strong and it doesn't mean anything, your body recovers. and then you should focus on your career right afterwards. In other words, you should get children out of the way first, just like men need to get their military and civil service out of the way first, and then work on your career, because that's what matters. But if children are the option rather than your career, it's like taxes aren't an option if you want to have an advanced society. Military service isn't an option if you want to have this advanced society, and 3 children reproduction isn't an option if you want to have an advanced society. It's not that we need to have children, women who are educated can compensate at the top by not having children. It's not a fungible contribution. People at the bottom can't compensate for women at the top or not having children. It just produces continuous recursive decline. Well, it's the same thing for why I say military service isn't fungible. You have to do it. Each individual has to do it, because there's no fungibility to life.
That's right. And it's skin in the game, right?
Yep. There's just no equivalent to it. So you can't. Reproduction and military civil service, which means that you're a father, a craftsman, a sheriff, a soldier, right? The whole thing. You're taking responsibility for the society. That's a lifelong duty. For women, children are a lifelong duty. There's no escape from the duty. Anybody who escapes from the duty is a free rider. And we can't afford free riders unless there's some extraordinary windfall that's durable. Well, there is no extraordinary windfall that's been durable. We produced the first age, which was the hunter-gatherer age of expansion, which was our ability to use tools. We developed the agrarian age once we ate everything on the planet and had to.
Time to grow plants.
Yes. And we developed the industrial age once we ran out of the capacity of the agrarian age. So there's no getting off the fucking hamster wheel. And so the option is, the actual answer is that women of extraordinary ability actually provide almost no value in the economy, but they provide extraordinary value in reproduction. Whereas women of low ability actually perform some utility in the economy, but the reproduction is harmful. So we have created a balance. This is another one of those capitalist malincentives.
Inverted incentive structures. My. That was a sad little bit.
I mean, the problem is that people want to not do full accounting, right? I mean,
very good.
People make either get away with the sophistries, right, or the sophistries or the fictionalisms. In other words, the false promises and lies, right, violations of the laws of nature,
right?
Or they engaged in an absence of full accounting, where they assume that they can get away with something because other people because there's enough surplus, or other people will take care of it. And other people just say, well, I choose not to be responsible. Well, I mean,
God's fault.
You've really got the whole spectrum. I choose not to be responsible. I assume my responsibility doesn't matter, and there are no criteria under which I need to be responsible. That's the 3-step spectrum. And for the audience, see, I just did it again. This is what we're teaching you. If you have any concept, divide it, create a spectrum for it. Until you know what the spectrum is, you don't know what you're talking about. You're probably lying to yourself. The only way to get it takes 3 points to make a line, and until you've got 3 points, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You're probably engaging in deceit by conflation, inflation, and some sort of fictionalism that overrides, yeah, exactly, your induction or deduction or whatever. So
it's all good, man.
Triangles and everything.
Just had to slip that in. In case the guys aren't watching, hey, pay attention, boys and girls.
I'm just like really disturbed that I grew up with like men need to be controlled and whatever, but we've been controlling each other for 50,000 years. And it turns out that, women are way more destructive because anything that men break, you can replace. But women break things that can't be replaced.
Hard to replace. It takes lots of time to replace that work. That's interesting.
So they're just more insidious. And I just don't know. The thing I want to know is why are men put up with it? In other words, why does it not bother us?
It's hard to see. And it's insidious enough that it's destructive of that which is not visible.
But women see it, or maybe they feel it. Any honest woman will say women are evil. Because they're evil to each other like crazy, right? But, they're only evil to each other when a man isn't in the room.
Right.
Because we don't put up with that shit. Which is why people prefer to work for men.
Well,
because if we either don't see it, or if we see it,
it will get called out.
It'll get called out because that's not okay. Now women are always talking about us, microaggressing and stuff. I'm like, no, that's preventing you from getting out of hand. Right? So it's not aggressing, it's defending.
It looks the same when you're on the receiving end of it.
MicroDefending is what it's called.
Okay, that was a disambiguation, right?
It's called MicroDefending.
Don't get confused.
Against female tendency to engage in every kind of fraud, deceit, manipulation, and cunning possible to undermine the production of commons. Anyway,
there you go. That was good.
I hate that. I just hate it.
It's awful. It's awful. But it's like it's like this thing. It's like it's been released, and it's upon the land, and unavoidable.
Yeah, but like I I'm surrounded by a bunch of little old ladies mostly. There's a couple of guys, right? But I mean, it's mostly little. The guys, we just like hi and whatever. It's nothing, right? But the little old ladies, they're always talking and they bring you little cookies and stuff and ask you how you are. And,
right.
They're fucking wonderful. I love them. I just don't, I love women at social scale. I mean, just fucking awesome.
That's right.
I just don't want them to, and I just don't want them to have anything to do with politics because they're really bad at it. I mean, you look at how feminized Germany is right now. I mean, you're seeing this come out, right? And all these female defense ministers, they have no place in this. Why do you think he's doing it? Because he can.
That's it. It's opportunity knocks.
And they're weak. Women make political organizations weak. They make any organization dependent on competitive ability, right, into one that is based on the presumption of cooperation. Except that's not how evolution works. It's not just how people work. It's not how evolution works. And so anybody who can exploit an opportunity will. And so we're the weird ones. These women think that, the fact that we're the most tolerant of females in the West, that they've got this illusion that the rest of the world's going to tolerate their female bullshit. They're not going to tolerate it. They're going to use it. And then we end up paying the cost for their unwillingness to pay the cost of self-defense, political self-defense against the kind of people. They think they can seduce men from other civilizations into cooperation with them on their terms. Why the fuck would I do that? Now when it means, now when it means, rainbow this and transvestite that and sexual exposure of our kid, because that's all female. That's all female, right? That's all female.
Not as I recognize female, thank you very much.
No, it's all female.
I understand, I'm just making noise.
So, I mean, the problem is that, what you see in our confusion right now in the States is that the American right, or conservatives, I shouldn't say right, I just say conservatives, agree with the Russian Eastern European position on culture, which is intolerance. We disagree with the political means of achieving it. In other words, authoritarianism.
Right.
And the reason is that we want people to be responsible, right, and productive. And the people over there want someone to be responsible for doing that, right? And so we want people to be responsible themselves for prohibiting this kind of degeneracy. And the people in the rest of the world want an authority to be responsible for suppressing that degeneracy, because they don't want the responsibility of managing daily conflict by suppressing of the degeneracy. In other words, high trust societies distribute power downward, the power and right and obligation and alienation to suppress degeneracy on the way down, all the way down, because the purpose of suppressing degeneracy is to maximize the possibility that every person, every family in the commons will produce offspring that contribute to the commons rather than bear a cost against it. So we're trying to normalize the family, and they're trying to denormalize the family.
No, that's it. This destabilization of all social organizational structures other than the state.
Yep.
Which is,
they don't want responsibility. If I could get one major thought across to all men, is that every single thing a woman does, even if it sounds really generous and caring, it's an attempt to evade responsibility. Everything they do is an attempt to evade responsibility for policing the commons. They'll undermine the commons at every opportunity. They'll undermine the ability to produce hierarchy and authority necessary to defend the commons. But everything women do is cost evasion.
you got that, fellas?
It's fucking horrible. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I freaking love women. They're wonderful. And I don't want to know this.
Wait, it's like this.
I want to go back to my happy ignorance.
Sorry, it's like this. You got to make this note.
Honestly, they'd behave properly if we just took them out of politics.
It's a
They just blah, 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 blah.
it's like this. All men in the hierarchy, the men have to know their place and perform their duties for that function, right? But the women don't want to know their place.
They don't want to pay the cost of responsibility. And our place is to bear the cost of responsibility for the capital, which is the commons. They don't want that. They avoid it at all costs, because anytime I'm trying to defend the commons, I've got to police you. And if I police you, that leads us into conflict. And women are hypersensitive to that conflict. And so they'll generate lots of conflict, interfeminine conflict for status, and then they'll break into cliques, which is what they do, which is why women have small friend groups, right? They have lots of acquaintances, but which is whatever, but they actually have only, most women have one or two friends. Or men, we just have usually a couple of close friends, but we have an alliance group, right? That are people who we're allied with, that we will still bear the costs on part of. And women don't have that. So, And it's because they can't tolerate variation, because it would mean they'd have to engage in greater self-regulation, and they can't do it. And I hate it because I love them. I think they're wonderful.
That will be points at neural economy.
It's just neural economy. That's all it is. Like I said, it's just the fucking, it's so boring. Once you understand, it's just the organization of the cables we call neurons in your head, right? Right, neurons are neural pathways in your head, and the way they're organized, right? You know, it's cheaper to go from Chicago to New York than it is to go from New York to Istanbul. And men are wired to get from New York to Istanbul, and women are wired, well, largely to get around Chicago, right? And that's really, that's all there is to it. It's the same volt. We got the same voltage. And you can cover a lot of local lines or a few long distance lines. And
That's it.
that's really, it's so annoying once you understand it. It's just because we've built all these mythos, right? And all this, and it's really quite simple, really.
Right.
What do you got? What do you got today that you want to go over?
Well, I've been working on my white paper.
So I looked at, go ahead.
I will send you the skeletal version of it for your consideration. I sent it to Brandon.
I was thinking yesterday that, did I bring it up here?
It's your call.
The problem might be the way I've positioned it. In other words, I start out with a methodology, and we call it the P method. You know, a system of measurement. We call this P logic, right? The scientific method, we call this decidability, science of decidability. The application of it, well, we call this applied P, or the first principles. We applied those first principles to the civilizational difference to, and we call this the group evolutionary strategies.
Right.
Right. We in Discover the used the P method to explore civilizational differences, coming up with evolutionary strategies. We discovered the Western group evolutionary strategy. And understanding the group evolutionary strategy, we understood what went wrong, and that was the expression of the female group evolutionary strategy, or our failure to regulate it. In explanation of that system.
It's interesting because it's like that group evolutionary strategy of the female is even predates the neural economy or the neural parsimony, because if the sexual dimorphism is predated the development of the nervous system, which is to say it's like it's a lower degree of cooperative potential.
Correct. Well, it's a narrower division of labor versus the male's higher division of labor. In other words, broader division of labor. And so which you see in the distribution of male and female traits, right? So yeah, they have a very narrow distribution of labor, and we have a very broad distribution of labor. So obviously they're going to form a herd, and we're going to form a hierarchy, or at least a network of hierarchies. But yes, so it's even if I don't know how to tie that back to neural economy, but there's a very big difference between a local and now and relatively limited division of labor, right? The female herd, and an over time, over territory, overpopulation, in other words, over large populations, over tribes, over whatever, um, a division of labor among males. So the problem is among males is that we're quite unequal when it comes down to hunting. And it may be just age rotation, it may be leadership rotation. And so we have to be able to form hierarchies because we can't afford the time in hunting or in war to come to consensus on everything. It's too slow. Whereas women, if you watch them, they're great. Great to watch women. They'll eventually get there. But it takes a lot of GSSRM, right? And positioning and whatever to get there. And it's fraught with political henpecking.
Right. And I would say this in that construction, it's exhaustion of opportunity.
Right. Their opportunity cost is, in order to respond to events, is really high when those events require organization of numbers. Their ability to maintain disorganization, in other words, a troop of females all maintaining some set of children in a constant state of readiness, that's fine, right? They're really quite good at that. And so their intuitions evolved to make sure that they could share cooking and child caring and duties despite their differences in ages, number of children. So I mean, it's still the case that daughters take care of younger children and etc. Right? So you have this chain, and then when the boys are rambunctious and they get out, right, they eventually join up with the men who have a more severe disciplinary thing. But I mean, if women can't comprehend this, but if you're a guy and you feel the sense of belonging, fitting into the hierarchy is wonderful.
That's right.
It's a good feeling. It's the best feeling you can have because you know where you are, right? You know your job. Following orders is easy.
Oh my, that was like when I went back to school. I went back to school and I'm like, this is the easiest job ever. They tell you what to do, you do it, and they grant you the privileges that you earned.
Yes.
It doesn't get any easier. It's like
Yeah.
this in the market is like free for all. Like,
Yeah, and we take people out of that, and they expect that what they've been trained for, years and years and years to the system of give me what I asked for, and all of a sudden you throw them into the meat grinder of the marketplace, and they're just like the meat is being ground up, and there's this, especially males are ground up on the floor.
yeah,
Because that's not at all how it works. That's why guys don't like to leave the military. If the military was slightly better accommodating, guys would never leave because it's so freaking rewarding to have all those other guys know your place, do your duty, take assignments, go on missions. It's fucking awesome. It's the same thing with during the workers thing during the Great Depression, where they sent out people. Yeah. So you go around the country, you find these beautiful buildings that were maintained by the
WPA.
The WPA, yeah.
I find them. They're right in my neighborhood, man. It's like they just built in 1934. Like, wow.
Right, and they're beautiful, right? Because it's hand labor, which is what we want. We want hand labor because hand labor is durable, whereas panel products are not. And so, I mean, it's like, well, why did we ever stop that? Why do we ever stop that? Well, the reason you stop it is because once we get out of the war, there's so much demand for labor. But the answer is you need to have a military labor corps, because otherwise you get unions, and unions are just corruption. So unions are just another communist vehicle.
It's funny. So my business associate's dad was he worked at GM for 50 years plus, and he said he has living memory of of when the union said, we're going to make a dental plan so that your dental care will be free. And he's like, oh my God, it'll never be more expensive than that.
Right, right.
And then it's like this, you got to hate it because they ignored him. And then it's like, they come back 10, 15 years later. And it's like, ah, you were right. Because it is what we were paying for dental is now the copay.
Yeah.
In addition to what we paid the union. Oh my.
The Singapore system works is because it's a ratio, right? You're always paying something, and that something is something you're in control of. The government subsidizes it, right? So the government has an ability to engage in price controls without engaging in behavioral controls. The problem with our system is the government is neither in control of price controls nor in behavioral controls. Whereas in the UK or the most of these places, the government's isn't producing a market, right? And so people talk about this. I've been in the Canadian and the UK and the I won't mention a couple, and the Ukrainian medical systems, and everyone is quite different. If you want daily care, you want the Ukrainian system. If you want to be an expensive, bureaucratic, painful process of oversupply and undersupply and over demand, that's incredibly expensive, you want the British. And if you want to get service really fast and really good, you want the American. Right? I mean, it's just really what it is. But the problem with the American is, which you and I will talk about, is that they've chopped your time up so that you can't actually give a shit about me, which is what I loved about the Ukrainian system. I show up there, and if I need an hour to talk to the fucking guy, I'll get an hour.
Right.
That's fucking.
Where we're at here is the devolution of the system leads to fragmentation of the doctor-patient relationship to the point where the doctor is a fungible asset, which you might get anybody that has the degree wearing the coat, and it's not the guy you talked to last time, and it's like, try to bring him up to speed, and it's like,
it basically means you're not engaging in science anymore, you're engaging in statistics. Unless the doctor knows the patient, right? That's not science, because he lacks the knowledge and information to make a decision, because you're talking about subjective analysis.
That's right.
Right. But the minute they've made the doctor fungible, they're playing statistics. And I always go in and say, the first thing I say is, dude, you know this bell curve? This is what statistics are in the middle of that curve. Every single thing you find out about me is going to be way over here on the right-hand tail. Right? My pain tolerance, the amount of stuff I've been through, right?
Yeah.
The way I think about the world, right? Everything's going to be over here. So you can't assume the statistics matter whenever you're talking to me.
That's funny, because patients will ask this question. They say, "But in this circumstance, is this normal?" And I go, "Normal has no meaning in this case.
There's no
there's no normal. There's just you." And
yeah, exactly.
They ask this question.
Humans are not statistically probabilistic, right? I mean, the individual human is a case. He's not a statistic.
That's right. I just go. Then they ask a question like, "Could it be that?" I'm like, I can only say yes to that. I don't. There's no other answer, because it may be improbable, but it could be.
It's highly improbable. Like I was going to others. My doctor doesn't want to give me an antibiotic I know will work, because he's afraid it's going to interfere with my OCD medicine, which might regulate my heart, right? I'm like, dude, you have no idea, right? I can.
No, it's even worse, because the computer told them there's a red flag on the screen. And
yeah, exactly.
He's responsible when it happens, and it might not happen.
I could chew that stuff like fucking M&Ms, and it would not affect my heart. Even if it did, I'd just take a breath a minute and it would go away, right? Because that's because I mean, you don't spend your whole life with this kind of shit and not. I mean, this is a new thing, right? It's what Zithromax, right?
Yes.
Right.
No, that's a common one. That's
right. I can I've had it like 30 times. If it's going to bother me, it would have bothered me.
I know, and it's like that one's a new one. They keep on. There's more and more flashes coming up about that one. It's like, oh, and then I don't, we're going down a bad path, man. It's turning dark. It's gonna rain. I gotta dispel the clouds. We have to move on to brighter scenarios, greener pastures, they say.
All right, so I was going through, I
Okay,
was trying to make a case to review what we talked about yesterday, which
Wait,
is,
I'm gonna make
what is this thing?
wait, what is what thing?
You're working on your white paper, right?
Yes, sir.
And so I was making the case that
What's
the
in the
P
program?
method,
Yes.
what is this? What is this thing we call that we're working on? Now, the problem is people want to hear something like, because everything's been so narrowed into a discipline, like if I say law, what does that mean? If I
Right.
say, right, they're thinking awfully small,
Right.
right? And so there's the idea that something like this can exist is
Right.
beyond their ken.
Right. There's a universalist function, episcopal in nature. This is where we're at. It has a omniscience to it.
Well, I would just say that it's just easier to say it's the science of decidability, right?
How a
Right.
human being can decide what is true versus what is not true versus what is undecidable.
Correct. Actually, what is not true, might be true, and what is undecidable.
There you go. I apologize for that. I knew it.
I know you knew it. I just want to do that for the audience. So again, I'm just going to do it because it's up on screen here.
Yes.
I've said it consists of methodology, and this is what we call the P method. I might have just said the P method, a methodology producing, right? A system of measurement, right? We call this P logic, or the grammars. The completion of the scientific method. We call this decidability, or the science of decidability. The application of the P method, the science of decidability, right? We call this applied P, or the first principles. We apply that to the civilizational differences. We call this group evolutionary strategies. We apply it to the differences in group evolutionary strategies to explain the Western male group evolutionary strategies. Once we understand that the Western group evolutionary strategy, we look for what went wrong. We call this the Semitic or female group evolutionary strategy. I don't know why this is, we then look at how did these strategies institutionalized and persisted. We call these the institutions of cultural production. We apply this system of measurement to human cooperation in order to correct the. This is the part where I should have been clearer. Western male, Semitic female. This is the war against their institutions of production. We apply it to the system of measurement, and we come up with the law that equally suppresses the violations of our institutions of cultural production by the Semitic and group evolutionary strategy.
Which goes to if there is an original sin of Western civilization, it is the failure to properly articulate the law.
Correct.
And it is the completion of the proper articulation of the law that is the application you're talking about.
Right. So, again, they're the oldest people. So the Jews have written down, that's their reform, as they wrote down their law. Their law just happens to be immoral. Right. So did I get the right reaction out of you?
It just caused me to sigh. It's like
I gotta get those. They make my day every time.
That's good. It's
those little reactions.
just tiny. Oh
And
my.
so the result is what we call the natural law. It
Wait,
turns out that dear friend Thomas Aquinas was right.
wait, it goes to Aristotle.
Yeah, sorry. It turns out that the Greeks were right, but Aristotle in particular. It turns out that's an but though that the ancient world was aristocratic, and it didn't have any respect for the little people. Christianity found a way for respect for the little people within aristocratic civilization. Unfortunately, because of historical tragedies, Christianity was inverted over the top of instead of underneath the aristocratic civilization. And what Thomas Aquinas was trying to tell us was that in a conflict between this evidence of the nature, the law, God's actions in nature, and our interpretation of Scripture, it is science that is correct, and Scripture that is merely wisdom. All right. So what we came out of with this natural law is a new updated reformed constitution of that natural law. What's not clear is what we're saying is this is a scientific and is the only scientific form of government. It's the only scientific law.
In that context, deviation from that form is not unacceptable, but will cause the group to pay a toll.
Right. We're merely saying that this is the optimum. You may deviate from these optimums, but you will pay a cost for the deviation of the optimum. Therefore, you may not promise that there is no cost of deviation from the optimum. All right, that's always. So if you want to do these things, you're going to bear certain costs. So this causes you to construct trades. This is what we're trying to push people into doing, to try to ameliorate the costs of going off of the optimum. Most of the time, it's going to be people with demonstrated capability asking for behavioral discipline from those who lack it. In other words, there's a trade there of productivity and wealth for behavior. This is simply parenting by political means. Think of it that way, right? Where you have a parent and a child relationship. Once you're in a polity, you have a parent and a child relationship. Now, we're no longer parents and children. We're more capable than less. And that doesn't mean we're incapable because we're bad. It means that the genetic lottery didn't do us any favors.
In other words, it's not their fault. Their incapacity is not the fault of the individual. It is the nature of the individual.
It's the nature of the individual. Now, this gets back to free will. What does free will mean? Free will to act morally or immorally, right? So we still hold people to the fact that we can teach them what moral and immoral is, and they have the free will to act within those limits. And we expect people to act within those limits. This does not mean that their economic productivity and therefore their place in the sexual, social, economic, and political hierarchy will be high, right? It means that they will stay at the bottom, but it doesn't mean we won't take care of them.
That's important. That absolves you of much of the slur.
Well, I mean, people jump to a conclusion, which is what we're trying to prevent. We're trying to get people to see the whole series of any body of logic or any definition or any concept. So they don't leap to a conclusion, but instead understand our goal is peaceful, voluntary cooperation for the benefit of all. And you've got to understand that we all have duties and obligations if we want that to happen. And that duty and obligation might be to work and bear responsibility, or to receive redistributions and bear my responsibility for just my own behavior, or it might be to bear responsibility for the whole polity, right? It's just whatever responsibility we're competent to handle. Not that we prefer to handle, but that we're demonstrated could be competent to handle. And so I get this shit all the time. I'm like, well, I'm just arguing for 5,000 years of European tradition that's been extraordinarily successful at producing the maximum returns on cooperation that's ever been achieved by man. So you can argue with me, but you're arguing, you're not going to win that argument except by lying.
Well, yeah, they prefer to slur and run.
Right. So we put this Constitution together. This is a real. This is what real. I almost did one of the no true Scotsman fallacy. This Constitution is a work of science, like the original founders meant our Constitution to be, as a work of science. There were some errors in it, but whatever, we fixed those. However, we also come up with policies under those. Policies are what allow adherence to and variation from this law. Right? And so policies must change while the law remains the same.
Right, it's invariable natural law.
Right, that's invariable, that's just science. Or in other words, a system of measurement by which we can tell whether we're engaging in cooperation or parasitism or predation. It's actually the purpose of this law is to prevent lying, cheating, and stealing in public to the public and matters public by anyone capable of of the power necessary to impose such a cost upon others. So this is the way we end lying, cheating, and stealing by the government, the financial sector, the academy, the priesthood, whatever. Right? So those are the reforms. Now, I wrote this early on. So the thing is, once you've said the forms, you also have restitutions. Now, whether we produce those restitutions, my goal of the restitutions is a negotiating principle. In other words, if you've stolen all of this, because remember, a criminal law is no law, no crime, but a tort law isn't.
Right.
Right. A tort law is responsibility regardless of the law. So if you've engaged in all these financial and political and informational crimes, then there is a restitution due the people who've been the victims of the crimes of tort that you've put out there, right? And we call these the restitutions. And then we have of course, my counsel has been thrown in the freaking trash and lit on fire, covered with gasoline, which was my attempt to create a circumpolar civilization, and that was the council. I'm going to put it in there just to show that it can be put. It can be done. So it's a set of ideas. It consists of the scientific method producing these things. We apply that method to the totality of human knowledge, all disciplines. We produce a universally commensurable language. We apply that logic and language to the common law of tort. This results in a scientific, logical, and universally commensurable application and a universally applicable law, its constitution. And then I should have a separate thing here. We produce a set of polities to ameliorate and correct for the defects that have been introduced because of the failure of us to produce this constitution. And then we can criminalize future violations of it, and we can eradicate the deceit from our informational commons. And this together produces a suit against the state for this reformation, restitution, punishment, and advice on the restoration of our civilization from war. So I think this is correct.
Right, there's a question I have on this. Go to the summary. You said, and a suit against the state.
Right. So what is the Declaration of Independence?
Oh, I see. I see.
And it's a suit against the state.
Yep, yep.
So if you want to go down here, of course, I'm nothing if not thorough. Um, uh, this is a declaration of reclamation, which is a suit against the state. Notice how long is the present injustices against our people. I'm still going.
The gift that keeps giving.
Therefore, right, having blah, 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 and whereas as such, therefore, and this is if we don't come to terms with the war, right? And given that these conditions, our goals are as such, and these are how we warranty it, right? That's the declaration, which is a suit against the state.
Right.
So what I've done is, and quite purposefully, is I've repeated the works of the founders, which were repeated the works of the English Civil War, which repeats the long history under the Anglo and Germanic traditions of appeals to the state, the monarchy, for redress of grievances. And we have civil wars, we have very civil wars, when we are not able to find our grievances redressed. So I just am working within the Constitution, the tradition, the common law, and the long history of Western civilization. By those means, our ancestors have evolved over time to produce a suit against the state for the redress of grievances that corrects the Constitution for the introduction of the female means of warfare into the polity, as well as the 6 or 8 holes that are in the Constitution that were insufficiently precise to allow such deceits and frauds to happen. And then I've put it into the law so that it's not possible any longer to make such false promises and deceits, nor to undermine our institutions of cultural production. It's a very, everybody thinks I'm such an asshole, but I'm like, no, I'm sorry. It's fucking rock solid.
These are not mutually incompatible, sir.
Oh,
Just saying.
I'm not a Nazi. I'm just.
I don't recognize Nazis. I recognize them as a figment.
Well, but I mean, the minute you bring up, you have to limit the reproduction of the unfit for markets. That's pre-war liberalism. Now it's some post-war Nazism for some reason, but it's also natural selection by peaceful means. Right? It's just limiting the costs of your reproduction on others. And we have to understand that all the pseudoscience that's been produced in the behavioral sciences, in the pre and post-war period by the left, is simply the denial of evolution. So I always think it's funny that they say, well, you guys believe in God and you disbelieve in evolution to the Christians. It's like you don't believe in God and you don't believe in evolution either. What's the difference between the Christians not believing in God and not believing in evolution, and you not believing in God and not believing in evolution?
Wait, that would be compare and contrast. Show you what.
So the fuck, it's just so funny to me that everything the Marxists do is a continuation of the female strategy to rebel against the laws of nature and to blame it on men.
I call the Marxists critical revolutionaries.
Yes.
They lack via positiva.
I call them lying pieces of shit, but I mean, it's the same thing.
Potato, patata.
I was trying to just get a laugh out of you. All right. So does that make sense, Brad?
Good.
That when you ask me what is this thing, I always have a problem with saying, well, you're right. Your criticism is, yeah, but Curt, you've written like a million words here. Where is it?
It's like this, man. I'm like, God, I'm with you.
All right,
What's amazing, you see, Curt, you can't help but leave a trail every time you think. It's like a bad snail. It's like there's so many trails around here. Oh my Lord.
it's horrible. How can you say that? I'm never going to get that out of my mind again. That's evil.
Sorry, brother. It's all good.
I just went so many vulgar places, and I can't think of a single thing to say that doesn't fall into that trap.
All right, so you just keep your mouth shut for a minute. I think what we need to do now, this is an excellent moment for a break. We need to cook some more coffee, let the computer compile the video, and then we can make part 2 where we're going to go over the law.
Okay. I agree with you. I haven't got agreement out of you yet.
What is the agreement we're looking for?
You were trying to say, I need to make people understand what Doolittle's about.
Yeah.
The answer is this, it's here. That's it, right there. The thing that I didn't say in there is I'm trying to drive everybody to peaceful, voluntary cooperation by trade.
That was the most important part. And I think
Right.
that was exactly what was missing from that little presentation you just did.
So that's what I got to add. I need to drive everybody to peaceful, voluntary cooperation by trade.
Wait,
What that means
yes.
is let 1,000 nations bloom. Because it's the only way to do it. The reason is because different groups need, not want, actually need. They may want them, but they want them because they need them. They need different commons. They need different polities to produce different commons. You can't mix groups with 15 points of IQ difference, different rates of maturity, right? At different levels of neoteny into the same polity and expect them not to conflict, because what's going to happen is they're going to naturally sort by neotenic properties. And it means that because your tribe's evolutionary progress is here, right, that you're at the bottom. Whereas if you move into different polities, now you're peers, right? And all that matters is that some people become markets and some people become innovators, right?
So what I want to say in overview of that, or distillation, is that you're seeking to provide a civil outcome between different people, which, as opposed to a uncivil or warlike response. To prevent a warlike response, we must have markets and civil arrangements between the people.
And I'm trying to prevent the favorization of an advanced society, because every attempt, without exception, of producing a heterogeneous polity must always and everywhere produce vast inequality that's concentrated at, in other words, even more inequality, but that leaves a majority very poor civilization, a tiny authoritarian civilization, because those differences in group needs generate demand for authority, right? Because that's the only way that group differences can be ameliorated, is by suppression. But that suppression decreases trust and cooperation. So we don't have a choice to produce multiculturalism. Multiculturalism means the Middle East. Period. End of story. South America is the same problem, right? It produces, absolutely positively will produce a race to the bottom. So you can have a race to the bottom where it's really bad for everybody, but all the poor people can blame the few rich people, right? You can break into you can have the superior people oppress the inferior people, which is the opposite, or you can break into federations. And of course, what's happening now is that the imperial civilizations, the criminal ones, right, which is China and Russia, and Iran, the criminal civilizations, because you have a theocratic, this is beautiful, really. You have a theocratic criminal organization in Iran. You have a state criminal organization in China, and you have a clan criminal organization in Russia. It's kind of humorous, but they've got pretty much the whole thing fucking covered, because you can't have a rule of law criminal organization. It's non sequitur. So they've got the whole thing covered, right? They've got the whole spectrum covered. Where was I going with that? Anyway, so you can produce a federation, and a federation is basically the optimum means by which we all agree to rule of law, but that we all produce different commons. We produce the commons that are needed. Everybody knows how to fix Black urban society. Nobody can do it. Everybody knows how to restore white society. Everybody knows how to do it. Everybody knows you can't fix Islam. Right? They can only fix themselves. Everybody knows that empires are bad, but the gangsters don't want to give up empires because parasitism on that scale is really fucking rewarding. You know, they talk about gangster capitalism, and I'm like, well, we do have some of that, but compare that to gangster Russian government or gangster Chinese government. You got no. I mean, look how people live. People live in China are freaking poor. People in Russia are freaking poor. You know, I pick on Ukraine all the time because it's the state can't defeat the gangsters. That's why they're poor. Our gangsters are world financial institutions that we merely need to oppress. And it's really easy for us to do if I can get the guys to show up to do it and issue a demand for redress of grievances from the state into the tradition of Western law, or Anglo law at least. All right. So did I get agreement from you that what we're doing here is here, except that I need to put in my goal, which is right here, right? Defining our needs. I had it, right?
I think so.
Right. So it's all there. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's there, because it's my mission has been very clear to me, very unclear to everyone else. I feel like I say it all the time.
Well, it's just you're kicking up a lot of dust, brother. It's confusing to the slow people in the class.
Yeah,
that's okay.
I really think it's because the idea. I think it's like you can say evolution, right?
Right.
With Darwinian evolution, it's a small thing with a lot of application. But the idea that you could unite the sciences and the form, physical, behavioral, and evolutionary sciences, excuse me, that's just unbelievable to people. It's even unbelievable to people who study philosophy, who are so confused by this, sophistry that they can't get out of it, right? I mean,
right. Well, there you have it. That's a great stopping place.
All right, do we get to make more coffee now?
Yes, it's time to make more coffee.
Do you have any donut? Do you have any donuts? No. Do you have any muffins?
None.
Croissants?
Do you know the Muffin Man? All right, I'll talk to you later.